We come together as all of you begin to envision at some point what stepping into becoming a yoga teacher looks like. One of the most exciting things I think about this path is it never looks any one way, but it reflects the dreams, the hopes, the desires, the lifestyle and passion of whoever steps into that role. So we started our teacher training with the question of what is yoga, and we're starting to get to the question of what is a yoga teacher. And so who else is better positioned to answer that than all of these amazing yoga teachers who have created such interesting lives and careers in tribute to this question. So I'll let them, some of them you know, some of you know them you know well, and others this may be your first time seeing them. So if everyone could just introduce themselves and just share just a tiny bit about maybe where you teach, and then we'll get into some more questions. Does that work? Yes. Cool. I think everyone knows me. This is the Rock Steady class. I have a few guests, and they will be completing their training in 2 more weekends. And one thing we've learned from working with teacher trainings thematically is that whatever we theme the training seems to get challenged. And so they're rock steady. So it was that idea of finding those places of, can you find the balance in the imbalance? Can you find the places where there is structure and support when everything feels like it is swirling and chaotic? And they have had so many unexpected challenges personally and within our community, and have continued to find those places where they can be rocks for themselves and for each other. And I'm so inspired by the teachers that they are soon to become.
Hello everyone, I'm Sarah Clark, and it's an honor to be here, and it's exciting to see a new crop of amazing yoga teachers going out into the world. So I started my yoga journey a long time ago as a teenager. Fast forward to New York, taught or worked in corporate America for HBO and then True TV writing. Just had a calling to do my teacher training. Never planned on teaching, just wanted to deepen my practice like some of you might agree with, and yoga just begins to do you. So it led me to teach now full-time. I teach throughout Manhattan. I just recently did yoga, meditation and pranayama videos for shapemagazine.com. I did my 500-hour at Kripalu, which I feel like gave me like the spiritual side of yoga that I really needed. Where I've also assisted teacher trainings there as well. Yeah, so a lot has happened just from following that small voice that told me to be a yoga teacher. Changed my life, went to India for 3 months and just backpacked soul search recently. So lots of good things have come, and that's it, yeah. And ask away any questions that you have. And I teach adults, vinyasa.
Hello, I know a lot of you. I'm Lauren Vincent. Through a fundraiser many years ago, realized during the 30-day challenge that I had to change my whole life. So I quit everything, dumped people, moved to the beach. Got rid of all that junk. Moved to the beach, ran a restaurant for a little while for the summer, came back jobless, and just like, okay, like, what do I love? What's happening next? And Sacred had a manager position open. So I landed back at Sacred after deciding to change here. And from there, teacher training, and now I teach here. I also have private clients. I do a lot of bartering as an artist. And I do kids yoga with Rachel that you'll hear more about from Rachel.
Wait, you do other things too.
Okay.
That I think you need to remember. You teach at Rikers.
I teach at Rikers,
a week.
Of course.
You teach a specialty yoga class for artists.
For artists
At,
through music school.
Through the music school. Am I missing anything?
I'm trying to expand yoga for artists, so.
You're a singer.
I'm a singer as well. So very much I went with, what do I love? What do I love? What do I want to do every day? And I was like, sing and do yoga. So now I've combined them. So I really try to do yoga for singers. I try to use yoga, like I said, I barter a lot. We can talk about that. As far as I have an album coming out, the cover art is a barter. My logo is a barter. I'm just like, I'll give you private yoga. Can't pay you money. And it works a lot. And I guess another thing that's sort of big in the last year was I made the big transition leap from, I left sacred managing to be freelance teacher. So I live in this new existence of like piecing every day together like a quilt of gigs and constantly the hustle for more gigs and releasing the anxiety of not enough gigs. So that's me. Yes.
Hi, I'm Tanya. I've met most of you guys. I teach here at Sacred, and I teach at 2 other studios in Brooklyn. And I also teach children through Yoga Foster and Wellness in the Schools. I teach at public schools. And one is a paid gig and one is a volunteer gig. And I noticed early on with my teacher training that I wanted my specialty to be with children. So the first opportunity I had to take a kids yoga training, I added that on. With my adults, I teach hot yoga. With my kids, of course, it's not hot. And it's really a big difference between adults and children. But as I teach more kids yoga, I'm able to bring that playfulness into my adult classes a lot more, where there's so much laughter and there's so much fun. And I think that that's something that can set you apart when you find your niche, is bringing that element into all of your classes, whether it's with kids or with adults or any other specialty population.
Hello, I'm Rachel. I know you guys. So I teach here, of course, at Sacred, yoga for adults, and then also my husband and I started a business called Yo Re Mi, which is musical yoga for children. And we teach in 10 locations now, and do in-school programming as well as after-school enrichment. And we now have 7 instructors. So it's a pretty big, huge deal, and it's only been like almost 2 years, so it's happened pretty quickly. Let's see, I also do prenatal and postnatal and various other specialties that I've trained in. I was originally Bikram, and then I found Dharma Vinyasa, and also trained in India and a couple of other things. So, and I'm a singer and a musician, and I'm a new mom. So yeah, busy.
Hi everyone, I'm Annika Lucas, and congratulations for taking your yoga practice to the next level, and for doing it at a studio that's very concerned with engaging in the community, taking yoga out and really using it to bring healing to the world, which is what I try to do. I've been teaching in prisons for 4 years. I started with Prison Yoga Project, and in fact I was sitting here last year in this panel, and I asked from this chair if Dara would come teach at Rikers Island, which she did, the girls there, and then she brought Lauren. And so the girls tell me that they love Lauren, they love her class. So I started my own nonprofit last year, Liberation Prison Yoga. I took many of the programs that I was already teaching, doing with Prison Yoga Project, so we currently have 18 programs a week, and we're in several jails at Rikers Island, and also in Bedford Hills, and Sotaconic. And I'm extremely busy right now with this new organization where there is a board, there's 7 people on the board, and we are definitely taking it to the next level. Really solidified now, and the programs are in place. We can always use some good teachers who are willing to volunteer. And it's extremely exciting. The most exciting thing about it, though, is being there, going in, teaching the class. Now, my background is I work with trauma, so your own experience is very important when you go in to share. But it's the most rewarding thing I've ever done. So, thank you.
And I'm very humbled to be here, Dara, thank you. I've been teaching yoga probably for about 83 years now. Now, yoga, as you said earlier, it just takes you, it bites you. And I'm an attorney by choice and by trade. Never expected at all to be actually teaching yoga. I started martial arts when I was 6, and martial arts and injuries led me to yoga and the stress that we all have in the corporate world or whatever it is that we're doing. And I took my first class and I fell in love with it to the point where I wanted to just learn more and take teacher trainings like you're doing. And I took one teacher training and I took another teacher training and I kept on practicing, which I feel is, at least in my journey, is very important as a teacher to continue your practice. So I would continue practicing, but never ever thought, I can't teach, I'm not a yoga teacher, I don't even know what a yoga teacher is. And the studio owner at Some Like It Hot, where I met Chi-Chi, said, Sarah, would you like to teach? I said, what? I said, yeah, would you like to teach? There's a Saturday class open, why don't you teach? And I said, okay, sure. And I taught a vinyasa, and then she asked me to teach it again once a week, and I taught it once a week. And at the end of the month, she gave me a check. I said, what's this for? She says, well, you taught these 4 classes, and this is the compensation. And I said, no, I don't want this. And I do it for free. And later on, I realized that was the moment that I realized this was for me. I would do it because I just was so passionate and in love with yoga. And what I started teaching was the vinyasa, but then again, you follow your heart and your dream. My background was martial arts. Fast forward, I fused it and created a different brand, which is what I teach and share, and I'm looking forward to sharing a little more with you tonight.
Hey, my name is Erica Mather, and I am a forest yoga guardian, and I teach in Manhattan at Pure Yoga at the east and the west side, and I also run my own forest yoga classes independent of a yoga studio on Monday nights for passionate forest yoga students. And I am also, hopefully this year, getting off the ground something I call the Yoga Clinic, which is specifically a place for teachers and doctors and mental health care practitioners to come together around, specifically around structural functional traumatic injury or around psychological care. And I'm really excited about that project and have been dreaming about it for a while. So I think that's all I think that's it. What about you?
Hi, I'm Anna. I teach here at Sacred and at a few other studios and work with private clients. I came through yoga through a dance background, and so I kind of started out, using yoga as like cross training and strength and flexibility, and then I did my first teacher training, and my yoga teacher said, "You didn't come here to learn how to teach yoga." She said, "You came here to open your heart." And I was like, it was the first time I realized that I was living with a closed heart. And so that is really what drives me to kind of share this opportunity that we have through yoga to live life fully and really be able to accept the gifts that are all around us, and that kind of that community that is so present that sometimes I think is hard for us to bring in. So that's my journey, so that's what I know to share. I also do work on like the social media production side of yoga festivals and yoga events. I'm starting a podcast called Yoga Journey, interviewing yoga teachers, so I would love to interview all of you. Kind of sharing the story, you know, kind of aside from like the, you know, the alignment and all of this amazing kind of technique and body awareness, but really this like, you know, what keeps us doing this? That is not always the easiest profession, but we are all continuing to choose to do that. And that's what I would like to share with the world, is like why we do that and how we do that, so we can inspire the next crop of teacher trainees.
And I do that. I teach dance to kids. I'm a dancer. I have a band who will be coming and sharing with you next weekend. So yeah, our name is Kirtan Soul Revival, and that's been a part of my yoga path is chanting, and that kind of took a bigger role in my life 3.5 years ago. So beyond teaching and chanting, and I'm kind of the business manager, I guess, for the band, and that's been an interesting journey. Not one that I thought I would be doing, but yeah, we'll talk more about that later. Oh, and I also do a class called Brown Sugar, Yoga for Folks of Color. So one of my passions is to really create spaces. I feel like I'm just at the beginning of that journey of like figuring out how to create spaces where people who aren't generally in the yoga classroom can show up and really feel comfortable. And that's something that Sacred does really well, but not a lot of other spaces do. So I'm interested in that.
My name is King Aswad. I have been practicing for yoga. I've been practicing yoga for about 3 years now. I came here because Stephanie asked me to play guitar for her for a prison yoga fundraiser.
We came on the same night.
And Rachel like cornered me in the women's locker room and got me to like sign up for 2 weeks. Yeah, and then I didn't show up for a while, and then I came to one of Stephanie's classes and wanted to get all my 2 weeks in, and then after that I was hooked. I was hooked on that, and I, you know, long story short, I'm an actor and a musician, and now I teach here at Sacred. I also teach at a gym in Carroll Gardens, teach at a gym in Bushwick. I've taught at a few schools for like 4th grade and a couple of other grades. I've taught in the projects. Yeah, I've kind of been getting around and teaching. Yeah, and you know, I've always been like, I'm a lifestyle type of person, so like everything that I've always done with my music and my art has always been about like lifestyle, and I've always tried to ground myself in, you know, living healthy and thinking healthy and treating people in a healthy fashion, and you know, yoga is just one of those things that have helped me to ground myself on that path, and it's, you know, it's spiritual, it's economical, it's physical, and you know, it's a journey that I'm still on. I'm very much in it, which is why it's really interesting for me to be sitting here as opposed to, because this is another part of my journey now, to be sitting facing you guys at this point of your practice, you know, and yeah, I look forward to sharing more with you. I don't know if that was everything else.
I'm really overwhelmed. Yeah. It's like, it's really weird sitting here like and listening to my fellow teacher trainees and everyone else who was also on our panel when we were teacher trainees speak and just be like, wow, this is our lives now. Like we've grown, and it's only been how long? Like a year.
Less than a year.
Less than a year, and it's changed my life dramatically, and I know it has for everybody else. So, but I am a yoga teacher. I teach here at Sacred. It's the only place. I was trying to think where I should start. I teach here at Sacred. I only teach at Sacred right now. When I first got my certification, I hit the ground running and went to this gym all the way in Sheepshead Bay because they were the only people that would have me at the time, and I taught there, and it was really nice. It was mostly older women, and it was fun, but it was a really long commute, and it just didn't make sense, and I stopped going there, and now I teach here, and I teach adults, and I also teach meditation, and I just recently became a Reiki practitioner, so I've added that to my meditation on Sundays. I teach baby and me. That's the other part of my life, is I am a preschool teacher and the assistant director of the daycare center where I teach. So that takes up a lot of my time and energy. So yoga, I'm trying to grow my yoga teaching and all my other things at that half of my life, but I sort of have two lives, my weekend yoga life and my weekday kid teacher life.
And the plants.
And plants. I love plants. I'm starting. That's it. Oh, did I? My name's Christine. Did I not say that?
I'm Izetta, and I've been practicing yoga for about 9-10 years now. I really got to deepen my practice because a friend introduced me to Bikram yoga, and I found myself at the Park Slope Bikram yoga studio where I met Dara and Rachel and Chi-Chi and some other people, and I interned there for a while. And when Dara opened up a studio, the first thing I saw was poles, and I was like, there's poles there? There's pole dancing class. And I showed up, and for a little bit I was managing the studio and working a full-time job, and after many tears and hugs, I walked away because it was just a lot. And where I work now, I'm a fashion buyer for e-commerce, so I buy men's clothing, and they gave us what they call it, summer Fridays, every Friday for the rest of the year, and so happens teacher training popped up. And I always thought that when I retire, I was going to be like this old lady teaching yoga in Costa Rica somewhere. So I better start now. So I signed up for teacher training, and it was a very bittersweet journey. And so now I'm here, I'm teaching meditation. Well, I like to say leading meditation, just helping people to develop their own practice. I have not been teaching asana, but I put it out in the universe that this year I will be teaching more asana, and things started falling into my lap. So I'm working on some new things that are coming up, and you'll be hearing about them soon. And I actually, I'm a stylist also, so I do a lot of work of marrying people's practice and connection to themselves, and how does that show up for them in how they dress and how they walk about in their daily lives. So that's how I kind of marry my practice with my fashion. So that's what I do.
Thanks.
I said that?
Good evening. My name is Akila Norris, and I'm not a yoga teacher. I just pretend to be. Most times I really, I don't know how this all happened, and I don't really try to figure it out too much. But I remember Dara telling me about, oh, she's going to yoga something in California, and I stayed in her place while she went. And I was just like, ooh, this is an opportunity to have a different lifestyle for a moment. And then she came back, she's like, you should try it. You should try Bikram or whatever that is. And I was like, whatever, And then some really traumatic things happened in my life, and she was like, you really should try it. And I was like, oh, okay, it's gonna sweat that all away, and it kind of did. I didn't really care about the poses. I wanted to do however I wanted to do it. But it felt really good. It felt really good to be free of the stuff that I can't say, even though I do say a lot of stuff. But anyway, I'm a dancer. That's what I do. I teach dance full-time to children, elementary school. And now doing that is all about the body. And so it was a transition to yoga. But in yoga, you have to be still so much. But I love it because it had me allow my body to catch up with me, as well as my mind and my spirit. So when they started this yoga teacher training business, I was still resistant, but I decided to go study. I was studying metaphysical science, and then that was going to be my thesis, yoga. So coupled with Stephanie's amazing classes and the fact that I said I'll do yoga as my thesis, and then I kept getting this teacher card because I do angel card readings, and then I was like, all right, I'm going to obey the universe. So anyway, I teach here. I teach in my school to teachers after school, which I really, really, really love, because teachers don't take care of themselves. We're always giving, being stretched beyond our capacity and still showing up for children. And my class is just growing. And they wouldn't seek it themselves, just like I wouldn't seek it myself. I didn't seek it myself. It was gifted to me. And so being that I have that in school, they come. And then I have some private clients. So that's my yoga. Yes to yoga.
I have a question, and anybody can answer this question. What has been your greatest fear coming into this work? As you're walking into the room, either teaching a group of students or just a private, or just being of service, what have you come up against in yourself?
May I? Sure. Yeah. Interestingly enough for me, like, this was something that I was already dealing with during teacher training, and it still continues to be this thing for me of just wanting to make sure that everyone is getting what they need and giving enough. And it's this challenge that I'm constantly, this conversation I'm constantly having with myself. Sometimes I don't sleep the night before a class because I'm up thinking about sequencing and thinking about trying to visualize what that class is going to be like. And it was something that was said to us by this panel last year, was like, as much as you want to prepare, you know, there's still this like thing that it's just going to happen when you get there. And it's been this process for me. And so my fear I wouldn't even call it a fear. It's a part of my practice. Whereas, you know, I just want to always make sure I'm bringing my A game. And I think it comes down to being prepared for class. Like walking into class, having a sequence in mind, having a theme, having my playlist ready. And, you know, but then you walk in and the class is like packed, or there's like nobody there. Like it could go either way. And either way, there's that moment, those jitters that happen every single time for me, and it's so fresh in me. And I don't know how many classes I've taught yet. I haven't like tallied up how many classes this year since I got certified have I done, but yeah. And just physically, can I be there physically for the class? Because I like to practice with the class as well as cueing. It's a habit I picked up from like some of the teachers here, like Chi-Chi and some of the other teachers that were like, you know, just right in there with you. And it was just something that inspired me. And so I'm doing a challenge with myself too. When I started teaching officially in July, I got a job at this gym in Carroll Gardens, and I started a challenge with myself that same month, and I've been doing it ever since. So I'm like seeing if I can make it to next July but I'm basically taking class every day and teaching sometimes and taking classes on the day. So it's just like a physical thing, and just waking up and like, can I do it today? Can I stand the heat? Can I, you know?
Yeah, one fear, and I remember talking about this in teacher training a lot, was like, who am I to teach this? Like, am I actually a teacher? Do I actually have real things to offer an entire group of people who are 40 years older than me to people who are younger than me? Who am I to think I could do that? And the biggest sort of transition for me in that process was teaching from my truth. Who am I? I'm me. So my theme every week, I'm not like, what will my theme be that I teach on? I'm like, what am I going through? What did I tell myself this week? What do I need to hear? Where am I right now? And learning to teach from there has really helped with that fear. And there was another thing that I forget. You said something that reminded me. Now I can't remember. So, yeah.
My fear, I'm going to guide it towards like business, since I think that's sort of where we're at, is I remember sitting in my apartment in Washington Heights. Now I live up the street, but I was in Washington Heights, and I had one of these major upheavals. Like, I left graduate school, my boyfriend who I moved to New York with moved back to the Midwest, and I moved to a new apartment. So I did all three things that you're not supposed to do at the same time. And so I did my teacher training, of course, at that juncture. Remember, yoga is for transitions and sustain, right? But so I remember sitting in my apartment when I was I was a new teacher, and I had maybe just broken even. I just had enough classes to pay my bills. And I remember it was right like 2008, and I lost like all my clients. I remember sitting in my apartment and being like, I don't want to live in poverty the rest of my life. It was very easy, actually. I mean, I filed my tax return that year, and I was below the poverty line. I was like, this is perplexing, right? I know there has to be some way that I can leverage this skill, right? Particularly here in New York City. And that was a fear that then what I did is I did something that every coach tells you always hire your coach when you can least afford it. And I hired a coach, actually, and I'm still working with that coach, a business coach, actually, and I love him. He's actually steeped in martial arts, and martial arts is I can tell you, has a whole different like business model, a whole different system of like, how do you run this show? But I feel like that's at every new level of my career and every new level of my personal development, and as I get older, because the things you want when you're 26 are very different than the things you want when you're 38, right? And so as I go through this, it's like that fear keeps coming up. Is like, how am I gonna make this career, right? Because it is a career, and you can be a career yoga teacher in New York City, which you can't really be in anywhere else in the United States except maybe LA. Right? So how would I make this career into something that's going to sustain the kind of lifestyle that I want to have? Because ultimately, I think that you hear across the panel that the reasons that we get into yoga is because we're pursuing a lifestyle, right? So yoga is a lifestyle business. It's not like a you're going to get rich business. So those things have to pay off. But as your desires shift, it's like always my fear that I actually move through at each juncture is like, how am I going to make this thing that I love to do leverage the lifestyle that I want to have, while simultaneously not killing myself? Because as many of the new teachers probably know, that you can teach 24/7, literally, and then at the end of the month you're like, why am I doing this? I'm so tired, you know? And you're like not inspired from going to class and thinking, well, I didn't prepare my playlist today because I was working all day yesterday. So how do you navigate those? And I think that if you address those fears head on, and you find resources, of which there are a lot of great resources in the world right now, which there were not in 2007, PS, that you can make it through like each new stage of that. And yoga teachers, above all, I feel like are creators, are transformers. I mean, listen, like, there's so many artistic, creative people on this, that you yourself then find this thing. What Stephanie said at the beginning is Dara said at the beginning is nobody's career looks like anybody else's. I think that's really helpful. It's really helpful to be like, oh, this is going to be my path. Who am I going to be today? What kind of yoga teacher? How am I going to make this work? And those are the fears that crop up.
One of my fears earlier on was what was coming up as I was teaching, and then what was coming up as I was taking the class, and honestly recognizing the issues, the concerns, where you were in your life. You know, and it's amazing how maybe across the board, we're all going through a certain transition, at least I was. When I started doing yoga, I was going through a horrific divorce. And that kind of was modeling, you know, I was practicing law 100 hours a week or so, and now all of a sudden yoga, and I'm in love with yoga, and I'm practicing, and I want more of it, and I want more of it, and I want to do it for free. What am I, nuts? You know, so that's what, you know, so my fear was that self-talk. And through, at least for me, through practice and being honest, because the martial arts, you're honest, but martial arts, I started martial arts when I was 6, and it was internal, you know, very philosophical. It was judo and karate, but it was also very external. You know, and that's what attracted me initially to the power yoga, to the vinyasa. It's very, you know, very, you know, intense and beautiful, and you sweat and you feel great. But with judo and karate, I didn't talk to my sensei about my feelings, you know, and how I felt, and you know, that's, you know. And even though I started yoga in judo classes, we never called it yoga, right? God forbid we call it yoga, because we were stretching, right? We were fighting, stretching. So for me, the fear was recognizing that, hey, you know what? You need to come out. This is a reason, you know, there's a reason this is happening, and to address it head on and embrace it and be willing to express yourself authentically. So that was a fear of mine. You know?
My fear still is that I won't be able to hold space for the people who show up in a good way. One of my very first teaching jobs was volunteering at a women's shelter. And looking back at that, I'm like, oh my God, that is awful that I did that in a way. Like, I just felt like I was not prepared in any kind of way, because I was just trying to figure out how to teach yoga. And then there was this whole other element of like, these folks are like going through serious trauma in their lives, and I was not prepared to hold space for that. And hopefully they had a good experience, I don't know, but looking back at it, I'm like, I feel like that was more for me than it was for them, you know? And so, you know, since then I've done lots of teacher trainings here and there, just figuring out like, how do I teach people who are really different than me, or who are having really different experiences than me, or who are having really traumatic experiences that I need to be sensitive to. And so that's been part of my work, is like, is figuring that out. And like, how can I teach people of like larger bodies because I don't have that experience, or how do I teach people who have different abilities, or, you know, there's so many things, and how can I use language that is inviting to everyone, and that's not going to shut someone off. There's so many pieces and so many complexities, and of course we can just show up as ourselves and do the best that we can. But I feel like that's constant work of like looking at my own prejudices, looking at my own blind areas, and diving into those deeper to be able to hold space for others.
And to add to that, taking care of yourself, because it's a huge job to hold space for others. And it is exhausting. And, you know, recognizing, there are times I've sent texts, I don't think I can teach tonight. I don't know that I can hold that space. Does anyone want it? You know, just recognizing like the point at which you can release your expectations for yourself. I have to teach 12 classes this week. I'm maxed out at 10. What do I do with these last 2, you know? Yeah.
And just on that point, off the mat into the world, they have a whole bunch of online trainings coming up, so you might want to look into that if you're interested in learning about trauma-sensitive yoga, or
that's what we do too. Because what you were saying, the issue that you brought up, that's exactly what is really addressed in the trauma-sensitive training.
Yeah.
So I want to turn the questions over to all of you, the Rocksteady crew. Go. And you can direct it to the whole group, or if there's somebody specific who you want to ask them specifically. Don't feel shy about that.
My name is Debbie. I'm recently an art therapist grad student, so on the note of trauma care and bridging yoga, and I Googled actually and I found yoga therapist. And I want to know what is your take on that. It seems like a very brand new field. I'm intrigued by it. I don't know certification, if, you know, my art therapist degree and the certification as a yoga teacher is good enough. So I just want to know if you knew anything about it, any resources, suggestions. Anyone? Anyone?
I do. I'm actually completing my 500-hour in a therapeutics teacher training because Forest Yoga doesn't have a 300-hour training, so it's impossible to complete. And right now it seems like yoga therapy kind of strikes two different avenues. One is sort of like holistic health, and the other is structural functional. And the training that I'm in specifically is kind of like a holistic health one, a little bit of kind of like dibble dabble. It's a little bit of Ayurveda, it's a little bit of slow flow, it's a little bit of yin, it's a little bit restorative, and it is a fledgling field. And the Yoga Association, the International Association of Yoga Therapists, is kind of like tightening up their thing. And there's certain programs that have been grandfathered in, and the one that I'm going through is grandfathered in. That said, I'm not sure that they are going to govern this going forward, in part because it seems that they have a strong leaning towards Vini Yoga, and that's kind of like all they do, and that's all they see as valid is Vini Yoga. And I see a lot of different kind of modalities as valid.
Yeah, I can address that too. Well, some of the people on our board are actual yoga therapists and certified yoga therapists. But we're creating 50-hour modules this year that are going to be taught in different schools where there's going to be a 200-hour training, but you'll be able to do the 50 hours separately from that teacher training, so you can add your hours in that way. So we're developing a trauma module basically for 50 hours. And I think there's a lot of controversy about yoga therapy, but I think essentially is that the process takes place within the student or the client rather than the yoga teacher coming and presenting themselves as the ultimate authority on the yoga. And I think that's very much what we work with, how we work. And another very important aspect, and I think it speaks a little bit to King's Fear perhaps, is that we come into our class very much to connect. And so the most important thing is to connect to our students. So we'll do a little round and then check in, and we'll get to know people. And we're just part of, we have something to offer perhaps, but it's very much a shared experience. So the inviting language is a very big element as well, that normally, I'm not sure what this teacher training is like, but you may get used to using commands. So when you start doing a trauma-informed style, you actually just get rid of all of that, and you learn a new language, and every instruction is an invitation, suggestion. It's friendly yoga.
This is for everybody. A few of you talked about how you married two of your passions, or how your history or what you've been through has made you unique or set you apart as a teacher, and how being you is what inspires people to come to class, and that's how you're able to teach. But how do you balance staying rooted into who you are and then also catering your class to people, because you also have to take care of their needs? So how do you balance staying true to who you are and then also looking out for other people's needs?
That's a good question. I'll try that. So you have to make some mistakes. And that is a big fear, is making mistakes. And you have to be open to hearing and asking feedback. And for me, that was like, that's a huge fear. I don't want to hear what you really have to say. Like, I don't, you know, but I worked through that during teacher training, critiquing, and be able to take it from a space of love, because that's all it is. People want the best for you, and you have to believe that. So sometimes when teachers especially take my class, I'll ask them, and I've gotten the feedback, you know, well, you need to like give space for your students to feel and think what they want to feel. And I'm like, oh, okay. So what I find myself doing is like a portion of the class, I'll be all anatomical. That's not my strong point. You know, enough, I feel like that is a balance. But sooner or later, people get a sense of who you are, and they'll decide whether who you are is what they need. And I feel like there's enough people, just like the variety in this room, that you're gonna speak to. So at some point, you make peace with that.
Yeah, I love what you just said. I think it takes time. It takes practice, yeah, just, especially when you're beginning. For me, I find that the learning never ends. Finding a balance never ends. Once you find a balance, that shifts, and you've got to find another balance. But what you said, your students will find you. They really will. And with that, you can come from a very authentic place where you don't feel like you're balancing, where you do feel like there's a union between you and the students. There's a trust that's been built because they're the ones that found you and they want to be there. So come from an authentic space. Teach from your heart what resonates with you, and trust that that's your path. And when it's time for it to change, when it's time for you to rebalance, you will.
And be present, which when I was brand new was really difficult. Like I remember first class was like, get the words out of your mouth. Second class was get the words out of your mouth and start walking around the room. And eventually I remember the day, I think I said it to one of you, I was like, I saw their bodies today. Like it was like beyond my prepared script. Like I saw someone's foot wrong and I thought, oh, let me say this cue and fix that person's foot, but everyone will be served by it. Or I saw half the people go into child's pose and be like, okay, we'll skip that next flow, let's take it to child's pose. Like you slowly build this ability to be present. And for me personally, a lot of that practice came from working with private clients, which my first one is the woman who made my logo. She's like one of my very good friends. And she was like, I kind of want to do yoga. So we started in her living room. So it was like, I'm brand new, you've never done this. Like it was like a stumble through. But her body changed, her practice changed, and I watched every step of that and got really used to being present with her. And realizing, like the first time I was like, oh, you can't even do this. Like, what are we gonna do? Your body won't do what I was planning. So just staying present and watching is really, really helpful to serving the needs of your students while staying.
And also, just to follow up too, there's so many yoga classes and so many different yoga teachers that primarily the most important thing when I teach a class is I want to make sure everybody is safe physically, right? But I also have to recognize, and that was something that was harder at the beginning, because my yoga may not speak to everyone, and that's okay. You know, there's so many classes, so many teachers, and it's, you know, as long as you're, like you're saying, you're authentic to yourself, and you're sharing your yoga, because yoga, as this panel shows that you put together, so many different types of people, yeah, but all by different paths, but all going to the same, right? Tall, search of the truth, whatever, you know, that is for you. So that may have even been, to follow up with the earlier question about fear, too. Why did that guy walk out? You know, you have 50 people in the class, and one person walks out. Do you know who I am? So to let go of that it's okay. That, you know, it's not going to speak to everyone.
So true.
Something very magical happened for me when I first started teaching, and like to answer your question, and I realized that my teacher training gave me all the tools I needed, and like for every situation there was something that we covered in our teacher training that was like literally it was there. We spoke about it already. It was a scenario that was played out, whether someone came and sat up here and told a story of an experience or whatever. And because of my teacher training and my faith in that, that was like, and it still continues to be this tool that I have, and this resource literally with my teacher training manual. It's this resource, it's like this Bible that I can always refer back to, that I've been given a process to like put together a class and to remind myself of things that I might forget, like, oh, let me make sure I have a balancing pose in my class today. So it becomes this thing. So like, you know, your teacher training gives you all the tools you need. And I don't know how different Sacred's teacher training is from other places as far as teacher training goes, but you know, I think
it's
that
way better.
I'm still very new to, like I said, I've only been practicing for about 3 years, you know, and like I've been in classes with people who practiced for like 16 years and 20-something years, and you know, once I started having these conversations with people, and then in my mind I'm like, well, I'm still going to teach you some yoga, we're still going to go through this sequence, and I'm still going to, you know, get that knee right above that heel, and you know, start, you know, I'm going to like still look for alignment, because even when you see people who've been practicing for years, there's always something that we all could like, you know, do better for ourselves. There's always that journey we're on. Even for like, you know, for Stephanie or for Dara, like when they're doing their own practice, you know, and I used to love seeing teachers come take each other's classes, because that was something that reminded me that, you know, we all have this gift of teaching and learning, and it's really like this barter, you know.
And also, just to add to that, like, you are, like, it really is such a community, whether it's the community here at Sacred or the greater yoga community, where like, I mean, I still will call up, you know, my yoga teacher friends and be like, hey, you know, like, I had this client who couldn't do this and this modification didn't work, like, what would you do? Or like, you know, the learning doesn't stop, whether it's in another formal training that you do, or whether it's just like, you know, kind of yoga jamming. I mean, you know, so many people have said like yoga just sweeps you up, and like it really does, and if you let it and if you want to, like the path is always there to go further on if you want to. So there's.
I also just want to add one thing to that, which I think is the places where you get triggered in your teaching are the places where you get triggered in your life. And so if I teach a class and the person who walked out of the room, that probably had nothing to do with me. They were in their own side of their own yoga practice, and they made a choice within their practice to leave. And I have no other information other than that they left, other than what I project onto them. So then I get to be in a conversation, if I take that home with me after, then I get to be in a conversation with myself around, you know, why am I experiencing feeling betrayed or hurt or undermined or disempowered or whatever it is that it brought up in me by the fact that somebody whose story I don't know at all decided to leave my yoga class today or whatever it is. So it becomes this sort of like macro situation where you get to go into your own personal world to be like, what is this that is coming up in me and in my own yoga? Am I willing, you know, to look at it and resolve it? Because most of the time it's really not about you, and so I have to constantly go back.
I'm trying to decide which one I want to ask first. Okay, so I recognize that we're all on our own journey, and you guys have all had your own experiences in your own classes and all these things that are uniquely yours. And I'm really curious, at the beginning of your teaching, when you were first getting started after you'd had your first training, what some of the biggest obstacles were for you personally?
Teaching.
Specifically, oh, just teaching. Okay.
I was terrified.
Okay.
Like, how do I put someone in a downward-facing dog, you know, that in a way that makes sense and that's safe? Just teaching was just, as I'm sure you might have, it just uses a different part of your brain that you just never thought how specific but clear and simple you have to be to just put someone in pose. So to conduct a whole class, it took everything in me to do, but I luckily had people that pushed me to teach my first class. Stephanie was one of them. I did like my last teacher training. We did our 200 hour together, and I didn't know I didn't know anything. And so you just have to have people that help you. But for me, it was just teaching my first class, which you have to do. Do not talk yourself out of it. You have to teach a class.
We actually make them.
Yeah, good.
They can get their certificate.
But another obstacle is finding the space to teach. Yeah. We're really lucky that this many of us landed on the sub list at Sacred and eventually were offered classes. I don't know that I'd be teaching half as much if I didn't have that, and just the hustle of like, you really want to teach, there's space, but you have to find it, you have to get the clients, you have to bring the money in, you have to get the people there. That's just a big obstacle in general, but especially when you're brand new.
I think that's one of the good things about New York, is that there's so many studios, there's so many yoga students that there are teachers. So whether you're teaching like a group of your friends, which I used to teach my mother's friends, 10 of them would get together, and that's actually one of the best ways to teach outside of the studio. And each pay me $10. I make $100 practicing teaching, and they loved every minute of it. And so finding different opportunities to teach sort of outside of the box, because there's a lot of us maybe think, okay, I got lucky, my first teacher training, I got hired at that studio. But there's 20 of us that did the teacher training, and 3 of us got hired at the studio. So looking at different avenues of teaching, if you have a job in the corporate world, teaching, you know, at your corporation, offering that, whether it's paid or for free. But I would say teaching is one of the biggest challenges, just finding those classes. And then as you find your voice as a teacher, you get to sort of begin to pick and choose where you want to teach. Like, I'm a power yoga teacher, and I maybe wasn't able to say that 5 years ago. It's like, I'm a yoga teacher. But no, my classes are power yoga, and now I know if I'm going to like a restorative studio, and that's what they do.
In yoga studios, I didn't really feel the passion very much, and that was really my problem. I felt often that I was just doing it to get my whatever, lousy $50, you know. So it wasn't really until I tapped into the service, and then of course I wasn't getting paid at all. But I really enjoyed it. So, and I did it without getting paid, and I was thankfully in this position, and I was able to do that at least for a while. You know, and then it got a little difficult, because then I had to match the passion with actually being able to live. That's why I started my own organization, because I was volunteering, but I was volunteering more and more and more and more. It was full time, and I gave up my privates and everything else that paid. So.
I think for me was the idea of being perfect. So, you know, that was what preventing me from teaching class. It was this idea that I'm not supposed to make mistakes. I'm supposed to remember everything exactly how it's written. And in seeing, you know, Stephanie and Dara and even my fellow trainees, see them, you know, forget to do a side or do something twice or, you know, stumble and then laugh about it, you know, gave me a lot of permission to make mistakes, but also that your students will love you for that, right? Like they are happy to see that, oh my God, this person makes mistakes just like I do. So that whole idea of getting over this notion of being perfect that doesn't exist at all. And that was my biggest obstacle in teaching.
To piggyback on that, I was a dancer and I had been teaching dance for years and years, so like going in and teaching a class was like not a big deal for me. But to go in and show up and be vulnerable and transparent and like really, really share myself, like inside, you know, not just my physical practice, but like my journey with the class, so that they could feel comfortable exploring their own journeys, was really like completely the hardest thing, you know. And I think I spent probably the first year or two of my teaching just being like, you know, like, yay, this is me all the time, you know. It was like so not, and so to like to like just show up every day in whatever was going on for me, and like being very transparent about that, felt important to me. But it took me a while to get there. Definitely took me some like trial and error, like, you know, and kind of to the point where I just like, couldn't do it anymore. I just couldn't show up like that.
There's a line.
Yeah. Yes.
You know, like, I feel like there is a line. You know, sometimes you go to a class and you're like, wow, this class is all about that teacher. They're really in their own experience as a teacher. So it's like that balance of just both sharing yourself, but also holding that, being able to hold the space for other people and know that they're the students and you're the teacher, and they're the teachers and you're the student. But yeah.
And then also there's a lot of sharing too, not just verbally, but just the sharing non-verbally through the class with the adjustments and
Words or something that, which I also think is interesting. So just start practicing showing yourself.
And practicing saying this is what I'm doing.
and authentically too. Like if you're taking a picture of the pose, take a picture of the pose that you enjoy and setting that you're not just